Welcome to the Career Composing Podcast, episode number 7. I'm your host, Nathan Swanson. Everyone's career is like a musical composition with your experience, talents, and dreams acting as the notes that drive the music. We want to help you use your skills to compose a refreshing career path. Share your experience, hear from others, and together, let's discuss how your outlook can change for the better. Today, we'll be discussing careers and franchising. My guest today is Will Taylor. Will is owner-operator of the Chick-Fil-A at Fashion Square Mall in Charlottesville, Virginia. He's been part of Chick-fil-A for over 10 years, in the last 6 years as the owner-operator. He's been married to his wife, Erica, since 2010, and the couple has one son, born just over 5 years ago. Will, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Nathan, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So to kick things off, I wanted to really just ask you, how has your career journey been up to this point? Just kind of some highlights and some inflection points on that.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you're having this discussion. I think a lot of people are at a point where they are going at a crossroads, and they're going to be probably looking to switch careers at some point. And so there's a lot of great franchises out there. But a little bit about my career. I am from North Carolina, born and raised, and then I went to school at North Carolina Central University in Durham. I got a business degree, and after graduating, joined AT&T Mobility in their sales department. After 2 years of doing sales for AT&T, I discovered Chick-fil-A, and I've always wanted to own my own business. With my dad having his own business, throughout his career, my uncles, business ownership was just something of interest to me. So I researched many franchises actually, and Chick-fil-A stood out to me. Spoke with the owner, and I joined his team as a manager in 2009, and managed his businesses. He had 2 locations for 2 years, and then I went to Chick-fil-A corporate down in Atlanta and worked in the corporate-owned locations, which there are a few across the country, as they are in transition from owner to owner and or franchisee to franchisee. And in 2014, I was awarded the location in Charlottesville after many interviews and working at the corporate locations. But I was able to prove myself and prove that I could run the business, and they offered me the opportunity to become the franchisee, the 3rd franchisee of this location in Charlottesville, Virginia. And so that's kind of a brief history of my career so far.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you unpacking a little bit. So from an overall perspective in franchising, what would you say are the different types of franchises? If we take just a step back, and we certainly want to talk further about Chick-fil-A, but I want to just, for those listening, those watching, are there like certain types of franchises that people can consider, and kind of what would that look like as far as someone looking at all the various options as gyms and hotels and things like that?
I believe there's a franchise for whatever your passion is, honestly, from cleaning to industrial cleaning to house cleaning, to Jiffy Lubes. I mean, so you got the auto mechanic side of things. You have obviously restaurants, hotel chains. There's literally a myriad of franchises out there. It really depends on what you're interested in, what your passions are, and kind of what you foresee your future being, and how much time you want to really give to a business in a franchise. Because franchises, to the contrary, they're not passive. People think of it as a passive income type of thing. You just buy into it and let it run itself. No. Franchises are very much, especially in the first 3 to 5 years, have to be pretty heavily involved to build your team, to make sure the systems are in place, to make sure that the people understand what their roles are, and then to also just ensure that you're fulfilling whatever your vision is, and whatever the franchise's visions are when it comes to their product. So it's literally a Google click away. Honestly, you can look on I think the Fortune magazine has a list of franchises at the top 10 every year. And then, or you can just Google the top franchises in America, and then you can look at a list there, and then kind of just do your search from there.
And you said you discovered Chick-fil-A. Was there a you're driving by one, you're like, hey, I think this is, you knew someone who worked for one. Like how did that work for, like, when you, to your point, figuring out which options work best for you? Like, I think this narrative seems solid, or that, I mean, what
Well,
would that look like?
yeah, 11 years ago during the other financial crisis that began because of the real estate, bubble. You know, I had a career change. I said, AT&T, although I liked working for AT&T, and T, and I was pretty good at it. I decided that it was time for a change. They had a hiring freeze as well
Mm,
during that time frame, and I was wanting to explore moving up and moving into a different area of that world. And they had a hiring freeze, and so I said, what, maybe this is a good time for me to kind of pivot and look at something different. And so I did the exact same thing I just offered as advice. I researched franchises, and so I was located in Indianapolis at the time, Indiana, and Steak and Shake is a huge franchise out there. They're headquartered in Indianapolis, so I Google searched that franchise, but I realized I didn't necessarily want a business that was open
mm.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I knew I wanted to do a restaurant because I recognized that even during that financial crisis, restaurants were still doing well. People still had to eat. So I just decided that I would just look at restaurants. I looked at Steak and Shake, I looked at Quiznos, I think I may have looked at Subways as well. And then somebody just in a casual conversation just mentioned Chick-fil-A. And then another person in a totally different state
Mm.
mentioned Chick-fil-A to me again. So I was like, man, there might be something to this Chick-fil-A. This is the second time somebody's mentioned Chick-fil-A to me. So, and a friend of mine that mentioned it to me said, I actually know the owner in the northern part of Indianapolis, one of the owners in the northern part of Indianapolis. So I went and had a meeting with him, and about 3 months later, that was back in May 2009, and in September 2009, I started working for him, and then kind of began the career there.
Wow.
So I didn't become a franchisee right away.
Right.
I thought that was a possibility,
Right.
but for me and for Chick-fil-A, it was more of they really wanted to make sure that you understood the business, and so they basically had me. Not they didn't have me actually. I chose to start working as a team member just to learn the business, and then was promoted to manager. Then started working at Chick-fil-A corporate. Got an opportunity there, and then so that's how I progressed. That's not the case for every franchise. Some franchises you just need to form a LLC or a group of investors that will all go in together to buy several or a territory, and then you can kind of start your business structure that way. But with Chick-fil-A, it's a little bit different. So I took a different route.
Okay. So what would you say are some skills that help you with be successful, franchise owner operator in this case?
I would say understanding the importance of feedback. When you're growing and learning, it's important to understand that if you don't have feedback or somebody really helping you develop and improve, and to help you fulfill whatever vision or dreams you have, if you can't receive feedback, then you're going to basically plateau,
Hmm.
and you're not going to be able to grow. And so I was an early adapter to that mindset of feedback is necessary. I always tell people it's the breakfast of champions, and what's the most important meal of the day, according to scientists and health nutritionists, is breakfast. And so I say feedback is the most important thing you need for your whatever career you're in, honestly. but especially when it comes to owning a business. If you don't have anybody on your team or anybody in your corner kind of pointing out some of the blind spots and helping you improve, because really as a business owner, you're in the people business. No matter what business it is, no matter what the product is, your business is managing and developing, leading people. And then your product, from your business of leading and developing people, is kind of the byproduct of that, And so, understanding the importance of feedback. The second thing was drive. If you have
Mm,
to have a will, you have to have a willingness to get up out of the bed. I know it sounds very cliche, but honestly, I mean, it's not for the faint at heart. If some people, unfortunately suffer from, anxiety from, or severe depression or something like that. Business ownership may not be the right route for you, or it just may not be the right time if you find yourself experiencing that right now, because it's a very tough time. And that's why I'm saying having somebody in your corner to point out those weak spots, to encourage you, to give you that feedback is very necessary. And if you can't receive that, and if you don't have those kinds of people in your corner, then you may need to do some research. Okay, discover that you want to pursue this route, and then go find the people before you actually jump headfirst into that opportunity.
so then, from a standpoint of using those two skill sets, as you mentioned, feedback and then really the drive to do that, um, well, kind of shifting to then on ramps into franchising. You mentioned the whole thing of if you need to have a group of investors and using those, if you have identified the drive and that you're open to feedback and having that coaching mentality of receiving that, and that you're like, hey, I now have the funds because you've earned that from over a period of time. You're like, now I'm ready to pull the trigger on opening this up. What would you say are some different on ramps into franchising? I know we've talked a little bit around the different considerations to have as far as like gyms versus cleaning versus other types of franchises, but like what would be some 2 or 3 steps to go into like, hey, I need to have this amount in the bank, and then if I don't have the amount in the bank, that eliminates half of these other franchises. This other one, am I willing to do this? um, what would you say that for that?
Yeah, most franchisees or franchises have a requirements list or whatever, list of requirements on their website. So it's very easy to find what the requirements are going to be for that particular franchise. And if it's not very blatant on their website, or you can't find it, they have, contact us if you want to learn more type of setting. With Chick-fil-A, I spoke with my operator, the person who hired me, the franchisee who brought me on to his team, and we had many conversations about it. So I got some information from directly the source of what he did, and kind of learned through that process. He introduced me to other people in their franchisee selection department at Chick-fil-A, and they also shared more information with me. But I had to get in to become a team member in order to really get into some of that. They do host seminars. I know Chick-fil-A hosts seminars from time to time in certain areas about the opportunities with Chick-fil-A, and I'm pretty sure you got your McDonald's, your Burger King, your Wendy's, your oh my gosh, Molly Maids, whatever it is, you have. They probably have seminars or times where
Hmm.
they are giving presentations about the opportunity of being a franchisee of their company. And so I would just, like I said, once you identify what that franchise that you want to pursue is, then do further research on what are the requirements. What funds do you need? What kind of material? Do you have to build your own stores, or do you have to have any of those things intact before? And so you just got to do some more research once you identify that. But most of it is readily available on their websites.
Okay. So it's again trying to have some have different runways per se. Well, as you do your due diligence of this could take a bit to get all the things together, and other ones where it may be much quicker, depending on again how you operate and again the different level of drive, as you mentioned, that people may have. So looking back at the 10 plus years you've had at Chick-fil-A, in this case, like what are some things you wish you knew back then? And so it's more of like, I wish I knew this, or, looking back, if I could tell my younger self, what would you've, I wouldn't say done differently per se, but more of like, how would you've encouraged yourself in that sense?
I would have encouraged myself to save more money. I had no clue when I was 24, or yeah, I was 24 when I started with Chick-fil-A, that what it was going to take, and the different cities I was going to be traveling to, and different cost of living for each area. And so I think I would have been more prudent when it comes to my finances, and saving more from the very beginning. So I think that's going to be very important for anybody that is going to be interested in the next 2 to 5 years of joining the franchise. Start saving now. I would have 6 months to, you know, I mean, I know it might be challenging and it's kind of a lofty goal here, but I would probably prepare 6 months to a year's worth of your monthly expenses, just in case, because starting a business, you have high hopes, and I'm a very optimistic person. And what I've recognized is that you have to have a happy medium or balance between being optimistic and then being realistic. And I have somebody on my team, or my advisory board, technically, I guess you would call it my advisory board now, who is the opposite of me, who shoots it straight, but also is not as optimistic as I am. And you need somebody like that. And so we'll talk about an opportunity for expansion or something like that, and he points out the challenges where all I see is opportunity. He points out the challenges. And so when you're starting to look at franchising, it's good to have somebody in your corner to point out the challenges. And then when those challenges are pointed out, then being able to address them, and if they're even able to be addressed, I would, I can't think of any illustrations right now, but like, you just need somebody in your corner to point out those challenges, those blind spots. And then you, as the potential franchise owner, or franchisee, need to be able to address them and come up with a solution to address those, challenges that your partner or your advisor has pointed out. So saving, I think having a person in your team, on your leadership team, to point out those challenges, and then addressing those challenges, and really putting those challenges on paper into a plan of how to address them.
Okay. And so if people are taking stock of this, as they listen of like, is this something that is something I like to pursue, and as they do their own due diligence, if they feel they get to the point where like, I don't think it's a fit, what would you say are some tangential careers from franchising? So they're related, or they're ones that kind of hover around franchises, but they're not franchises themselves.
Hmm.
Any
I,
thoughts
I
on any options for that?
Yeah, I think if you are not adverse to risk, and want to, and get jump into something like that, but you also want to be a part of a franchise or want to be part of a team, every Michael Jordan needs a Scottie Pippen. And so I think if for every one number one, that's quote unquote, CEO, there's always a CFO or CTO or a number two to point out the roadblocks that could be, in the near future, or to point out opportunities that maybe that CEO is not being able to see. I think if you can position yourself to potentially do that, that could be a great opportunity for you. Every team so every CEO is looking for leaders to help them lead the business. So if you don't want to necessarily be the franchise owner, maybe position yourself to be a part of the franchise development team, or maybe for that franchisee, say, hey, I would love to help you grow your brand or grow your influence or your business. I just don't want to actually be that person to assume all the risk. That's not me, but I can help you grow it. I can help you organize. I can help you, find talent and train them. Those types of things are very valuable to any franchisee. And so if you could position yourself or gain experience to position yourself to be one of those people, I think that's a great opportunity. Like I said, every Scottie Pippen got rings too, and so I think you could position yourself to be a number two, or number three, number four, of a leadership team or of a group. That could be a great opportunity for you.
Okay. And I think one thing, going back to, where things are at for you right now with being owner operator during the pandemic, now just taking a snippet of like what you've been experiencing the last few months, I guess it's kind of question one of like, how's that gone? And then also kind of just looking into the future of franchises in general, of like what opportunities do you see in the future, whether continuing in the pandemic or like, again, how, I don't know when the pandemic will I don't wrap up, like when it diminishes, I guess, but like
Hmm.
what does that look like? So really kind of a two-parter there.
I would say, so for us, it's been very, very challenging. It's been very challenging, not only with school being out and us having to bring our son to work, trying to, keep the lights on, trying to, maintain or keep hours coming for people. It's just been super challenging. The whole pivot of um, um, going from a mall that's or a restaurant that's inside of a mall, and all the operations are done inside the mall, from the production of the food to the actual hospitality and service, to having to flip that upside down and produce the food inside and then walk it outside to our guests, our customers' cars. Has been it's been a whirlwind.
Right. Just to
But I
inject, just to pause on that. So what you're sharing is that you had to pivot for basically adding an ad hoc drive-through in the parking lot of the mall, which enabled, because the mall was closed
That is
otherwise.
correct.
And so you
That
had to
is correct. And this
basically
is
set up some cones and a tent and all of that, and have a little cart, as you mentioned, where I think you'd share with me off, prior to the interview, that Chick-fil-A has this technology that enables you to order it off of tablets that then sends in the point of sale system. So it's all integrated, so that it's just a matter of then producing the food, as you mentioned, inside and just transporting it out.
Yeah, and that's one of the many benefits of being a part of a franchise system. That technology and that research and development had been done years prior to this COVID. They saw somebody on that team saw the future and started developing a technology to help us address a challenge such as COVID, which is one of the reasons why a lot of the mall locations had to close for a while due to governmental mandates. But the technology was there. So when the government mandates were lifted, and people were able to, certain Chick-fil-A's and malls were able to reopen, they started a drive-through too,
Hmm.
and they were able to utilize the same technology that I was able to utilize from March 23rd, when the government mandates for all dining rooms to be closed, up until now. And now the dining rooms are open our dining room is open for carry out. So we have a dining room, so you can do carry out, or you can also stay in our drive-through, which the mall has allowed us to continue. And so it's definitely been so it's an additional revenue stream for us that we had never even considered prior to COVID. And so but I think but so we're definitely hanging in there. It's definitely been a challenge. We've had to really rally the team together to stay focused on our ultimate goal of being a place of restoration, even with a drive-through. How can we make sure our guests feel restored? And that mentality is different when you don't we don't have the same setup. It's just really challenging to figure out that. So we've had some hiccups, but we've been able to address some of those challenges. We were able to actually identify a couple of other people to join our leadership team who also were in the same position I was in 2009, who are having
Wow.
a career change. They're part-time, but they have to some degree joined my leadership team and are helping me identify opportunities and also challenges to address to make our drive-through more efficient and more effective, to help us with. We also started a delivery system very similar to like Domino's, where we actually can now deliver food. Instead of using Grubhub, you download our Chick-fil-A app, which is the technology that they came out with a year prior to this, and you can download our app and click on delivery, and we can deliver your Chick-fil-A to your house now, which was not something that we had considered either. So there are a lot of different technologies that Chick-fil-A has come up with that has now, in this unfortunate circumstance, has positioned us to be able to utilize them to remain open, to give our team hours and keep them employed. And I think in the long run, it could be to our huge benefit for us. But right now, we're still pivoting and trying to figure out the best ways to increase efficiencies and still be effective towards fulfilling our vision of being a place of restoration. But I believe in the broader, spectrum of things, when it comes to franchises, a lot of franchisees, a lot of franchises are pivoting and are trying to develop the same technology that we have developed. And so not too many people have been able to pivot quickly or quick enough. And so it's been challenging for a lot of small business owners and franchisees and smaller restaurants that are not a part of a franchise system. It's been challenging for everyone involved, honestly, but especially for those that are outside of the franchise system, who don't have the opportunity to have that kind of technology. So once again, it's another benefit to a franchise system. I'm not a chef. I am passionate about people, about this brand. And so it was a match for me. But if you are a chef, then you're like, hey, I have my own product, I have my own, recipes, then that's great. Then that avenue is the best avenue for you. But for me, I wanted to be a part of a system or a franchise that already had a system developed, that all I needed to do was find the right people to help me, produce the right product. And so, or to produce the product, in a way that helps, fulfill our vision. So, but yeah, I believe franchises are going to all have to pivot and figure out new ways of doing business, and sooner rather than later. And those who are not able to act accordingly are going to probably, unfortunately, have to gracefully bow out.
Right. And one thing, just as you mentioned, with the future of it, and there's a lot of certainly unknowns to what not only the next month will play out, but the next remainder of the year. And so that's something to, as you mentioned, to the audience, really keep it in mind about as you're going about this. Certainly, as you mentioned, look at the skills of the drive and being open to feedback. And then, one of the things you wish you knew of, like just the amount of savings you like to have in the bank that would enable you to have more flexibility as you approach this type of career.
Mm-hmm.
And so I this is, I think, a great time to, and just in summarizing, I really appreciate you unpacking further about this career, and again, you sharing anecdotes about how you've even flexed, like being flexible in this pandemic, and how that's actually been something that may actually continue, where you guys can continue using the drive-through. Let's say the things lift up even further. I mean, it sounds like there's an opportunity there where you can continue having a drive-through, and that's just a matter of working with the mall potentially of, could you have this parking lot for this time, and which again, since you don't have that opportunity, whereas a fixed store does, this I think opens up, as you mentioned, a few options that you may have not been aware of beforehand.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Sorry for that. But yeah, I think it's gonna present opportunities. And like I said, that's one of those things where having somebody on your team that can identify those opportunities and say, hey, this is going to be challenging, but I think we can do it. It's very important to have, because there was a time where I was like, you know what, this is not going to work. Oh my gosh, how are we going to stay open? And and so having that team is important. I mean, when it comes to your business, and so having a strong team that believes in you, and has the resiliency to just embrace challenges, is important. And so yeah, I think it's still something for everyone to consider when they're thinking about joining a franchise. That all the challenges that and your risk tolerance, but there's always some, as the saying goes, the greater the risk, sometimes the greater the reward. so
Right.
so something to consider.
Okay. Well, Will, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with the audience here about what's it like in this career, and with that, thanks again for joining. And with that, we'll wrap up. And again, appreciate your insight and thoughts.
My pleasure. It's really good. Thank you for doing this. I think a lot of people are going to need to hear this podcast to help them figure out their next steps, honestly. And so I think this is a good pivot on your end, actually, to figure out a new way to help people, and continue your business as well. So kudos to you.
I appreciate your encouragement.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Will, thanks again, and we'll wrap here.
My
So
pleasure.
this has been another great look into a career path that many of you may have not considered in the audience, and I hope this helps some of you really think about the possibilities with your career composition. What career would you like to hear more about? If you have thoughts or ideas on that, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@careercomposing.com, and we may interview someone in that field in a future episode. Thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your day, and keep composing.